Rural Louisiana, 1879. There are places where silence weighs so heavily it feels alive. Where hallways echo with absence, where every room holds memories sharp enough to cut. The White Heron Plantation was one of those places. Once, it had been the beating heart of the parish, a vast stretch of sugarcane fields rippling under the southern sun, white columns gleaming against the sky, music and laughter spilling from the veranda during harvest celebrations that lasted long into the night. Fiddles, banjos, and voices once filled the air until dawn. But that was before death arrived. Before grief took residence in every corner of the house. Now, silence ruled. Colonel William H. Montgomery was 37 years old when his wife died. Not old enough to be bitter by nature, yet far too young to feel so hollow. Tall, broad-shouldered, molded by years on horseback in command, he carried himself with the authority of a man born to lead. His dark hair had begun to silver at the temples, his mustache thick and well-kept, his amber-brown eyes once warm with humor and command. But humor had abandoned him. For 8 months since Margaret Montgomery drew her last breath, the colonel had moved through his own home like a ghost. He spoke little. Gave fewer orders. Spent endless hours locked inside his study, surrounded by ledgers he never read and bottles he emptied far too quickly. Yet none of that compared to the pain that truly destroyed him. Because his grief was only a shadow of a greater tragedy. His daughter. Little Eleanor Montgomery had just turned 4 years old when her mother died. 4 years of laughter bright enough to fill the house. 4 years of honey blonde curls bouncing as she ran barefoot through the corridors, chasing chickens in the yard, stealing molasses treats from the kitchen, laughing so freely her mother used to say she sounded like a songbird. But Eleanor no longer laughed. From the night her mother died, the child forgot how to sleep. The tragedy had arrived as tragedies always do, without warning, without mercy. Margaret had been delicate since childhood, raised among lace and porcelain, admired for her refinement and fragility. When she became pregnant again, concern spread quickly. Her first pregnancy, which brought Eleanor into the world, had already been difficult. But this time, Margaret insisted. She wanted to give her husband a son. The labor lasted 2 days. The most experienced midwife in the parish was summoned. Then the local doctor. Then prayers filled every corner of the plantation chapel. Colonel Montgomery never left the bedroom door, listening to his wife's cries, helpless in a way no battlefield had ever made him feel. The baby boy was born, but he lived only 3 hours. Long enough to be baptized. Long enough for Margaret to hold him once. Long enough for her to whisper a lullaby through tears. Then the fever came. At first, the doctor said it was normal. By the 3rd night, Margaret was delirious, calling for her dead child, reaching into empty air. Every remedy failed. Every prayer fell silent. She died at dawn. Eleanor stood at the funeral in her father's arms, silent, her green eyes fixed on the polished coffin as if something inside her had already broken. And from that night on, she never truly slept again. At first, they thought it was shock. Then weeks passed. Then months. The child screamed through the nights, not the cry of a spoiled child, but a cry of terror and abandonment. She clung desperately to anyone who tried to put her down, fought the carved mahogany crib that once held her peacefully, woke from nightmares soaked in sweat, whispering that her mother was calling her, that something dark was coming for her too. Doctors failed. Herbalists failed. Faith healers failed. Sedatives only made it worse. Eleanor grew thinner. Paler. Her once bright eyes carried a sorrow far too old for a 4-year-old child. And her father fled. Colonel Montgomery buried himself in work and whiskey, riding the fields from dawn until night just to avoid facing the pain in his daughter's eyes, eyes so much like her mother's. Only one person truly watched all of this unfold. Mrs. Abigail Turner, the elderly black housekeeper who had raised William Montgomery herself, carried the weight of the plantation's grief on her shoulders. She had seen generations come and go, joy and ruin alike. And one evening, holding the sobbing child in her arms, she made a decision that would change everything. Because somewhere near the creek, beyond the big house, lived a young laundress. A poor girl. With nothing to offer, except her voice. If you're enjoying this story so far, subscribe now to Stories of the Season and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I love reading your messages and connecting with you. And now, let's meet the young woman who would change the fate of an entire household. Beyond the manicured lawns of White Heron Plantation, past the rows of oak trees draped in Spanish moss, and down a narrow dirt path that led toward the creek, stood a small wooden cabin barely holding itself together. That was where Clara May Whitfield lived. She was 19 years old. The daughter of a laundress. Poor by every measure that mattered in that world, except one. Clara possessed a voice that carried peace. She lived there with her mother, Ruth Whitfield, a widow who had washed clothes for the Montgomery plantation since before Clara could walk. Their cabin had a sagging porch, a tin roof patched more than once, and floors worn smooth by bare feet. But it was clean. Always clean. And filled with a quiet dignity that came from survival, not comfort. On the evening Mrs. Abigail Turner made her decision, Clara sat on the porch step, a basket of mended shirts beside her, humming softly while watching the fireflies blink into life over the tall grass. Her mother stepped outside, holding 2 tin cups of warm chamomile tea. "You're humming again," Ruth said gently, handing 1 cup to her daughter. "You always hum when you're thinking." Clara smiled faintly. "I wasn't thinking about anything special. Just, watching the lights." Ruth studied her daughter for a moment. Clara had inherited her calm eyes and her quiet strength, but her beauty was undeniable: soft features, warm brown skin, dark hair usually pulled back in a simple knot. Nothing flashy. Nothing demanding attention. Yet something about her presence made people feel at ease. "You hear about the Colonel's little girl?" Ruth asked softly. Clara nodded. Everyone had heard. "She hasn't slept in months," Ruth continued. "Poor child. Lost her mama so young." Clara's fingers tightened around the cup. "She must be so scared." Ruth sighed. "Fear does things to children. Breaks them in ways adults don't see." Clara didn't answer. She stared out toward the creek, her thoughts drifting somewhere else, to the lullabies her mother had sung when her own father died, to the way music had once wrapped her fear in warmth. She didn't know that, at that very moment, her name was being spoken inside the big house. The next morning came early. Clara had barely finished braiding her hair when she heard hurried footsteps approaching the cabin. Her mother opened the door to find Mrs. Turner's assistant, breathless and clearly nervous. "Miss Abigail sent me," the woman said quickly. "She wants Clara to come up to the house." Ruth stiffened instantly. "Is something wrong?" "No, ma'am. She just wants to talk." Clara felt her stomach twist. "About what?" The woman shook her head. "She didn't say." Ruth looked at her daughter, worry etched into her face. "You haven't done anything wrong, have you?" "No, Mama," Clara said quickly. "I promise." After a long moment, Ruth nodded. "Go, then. But don't let anyone talk down to you. You hear me?" Clara smiled and kissed her mother's cheek. "I'll be back soon." She followed the path uphill toward the plantation, each step feeling heavier than the last. She had delivered laundry before, yes, but always through the back entrance, always keeping her eyes low. Today, she was being summoned. When she reached the kitchen entrance, the smells of baking bread and boiling coffee filled the air. Servants paused to stare as she passed. Whispers followed her down the corridor. Mrs. Turner waited in a small sitting room, hands folded tightly in her lap. "Come in, child," she said gently. Clara stepped forward, heart pounding. "Do you like children?" Mrs. Turner asked without preamble. Clara blinked. "Yes, ma'am. Can you sing? Clara hesitated, then nodded. A little. Mrs. Turner's eyes softened. Would you be willing to try something very important? Only then did she explain. She told Clara about Eleanor. About the sleepless nights. The doctors. The screaming. The child wasting away. Clara felt tears burn behind her eyes. I don't know if I can help, she said honestly. I'm not trained. I'm not asking for training, Mrs. Turner replied. I'm asking for kindness. She took Clara's hands. I heard you singing by the creek last week. That voice, it carried peace. And peace is what that child needs. Clara swallowed hard. Will the Colonel allow this? Mrs. Turner smiled sadly. He doesn't know yet. And if he did, he might say no. But I'm running out of time. A long silence followed. Then Clara nodded. I'll try. Eleanor's bedroom was filled with light, white curtains, lace pillows, shelves of untouched toys. Yet the air felt heavy, as if sadness itself had settled there. The little girl sat curled against the wall, clutching an old dress of her mother's, her green eyes dull with exhaustion. Clara entered quietly and sat on the floor several feet away. She said nothing. Didn't approach. Didn't force a smile. She simply waited. Minutes passed. Then Clara began to sing. It was a lullaby her mother had taught her, soft, slow, filled with images of stars and safety and gentle hands holding the night at bay. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Eleanor didn't move at first. But she listened. Slowly, the child turned her head. Clara continued, eyes lowered, careful not to break the fragile moment. The girl's breathing slowed. Her fingers loosened their grip. And for the first time in 8 months, Eleanor's eyes grew heavy. Mrs. Turner watched from the doorway, hand pressed to her mouth. A miracle was unfolding. Before we continue, if this story is touching your heart, subscribe to Stories of the Season and leave a comment telling me what part moved you most so far. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Now, what happens next will change Clara's life forever. Colonel Henry Whitmore returned to White Heron Plantation that evening the same way he had returned every day since his wife's death, exhausted, distant, and hollowed out by grief. He dismounted his horse slowly, removing his gloves with mechanical precision. The servants noticed immediately that something was different in the house that night. The air felt lighter. Not joyful. But less heavy. Less suffocating. Henry didn't notice. He handed the reins to a stable boy and walked toward the house, boots crunching softly against the gravel path. He expected the usual sounds, Eleanor's cries echoing down the hallway, the murmured voices of desperate caretakers, the low hum of tension that had lived inside these walls for months. But instead, there was silence. Not the dreadful, brittle silence of despair. A living silence. Henry stopped at the threshold of the house. His chest tightened. "Where is my daughter?" he asked sharply. Mrs. Turner appeared at once, her eyes shining in a way Henry hadn't seen since before the funeral. "She's asleep, sir." Henry laughed bitterly. "Don't mock me, Abigail." "I would never," she said softly. "She's truly asleep." The word struck him like a blow. "Asleep, how long?" he asked. "Nearly an hour," Mrs. Turner replied. Henry's breath caught. An hour. Eleanor hadn't slept more than 15 minutes at a time in 8 long months. Without another word, he strode toward the staircase, 2 steps at a time, his heart pounding harder with each step. Mrs. Turner followed, struggling to keep up. When he reached the doorway of Eleanor's room, he froze. There, bathed in the soft glow of lamplight, was his daughter, peaceful, breathing evenly, her small hand wrapped around another's. And sitting on the floor beside the bed was a young woman Henry had never seen before. She wore a simple dress. No jewelry. No pretense. Her dark hair was pulled back, her posture careful, reverent, as if she knew she was sitting inside something sacred. She was humming. So softly that the sound barely carried beyond the walls of the room. Henry didn't move. Didn't speak. He simply stared. The girl noticed him then. She stopped humming and slowly looked up, her eyes widening as she recognized who stood before her. I'm sorry, sir, she whispered instinctively, trying to stand. But Eleanor stirred in her sleep, tightening her grip. The young woman froze, then slowly sat back down, her hand still trapped in the child's. Mrs. Turner stepped forward. "Colonel, this is Clara Whitfield. The laundress's daughter." Henry barely heard her. His gaze was fixed on Clara. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Clara swallowed. "My name is Clara, sir." "And you did this?" He gestured toward Eleanor. "I just sang," she said honestly. "And stayed." Henry closed his eyes. Doctors. Tonics. Remedies. Prayers. Months of desperation. And all it took was a voice and presence. "How long have you been here?" he asked. "Just today, sir." Henry let out a shaky breath and stepped closer, lowering his voice instinctively, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace. "What were you singing?" Clara hesitated. "A lullaby my mother used to sing to me." Henry nodded slowly. "Will you stay?" he asked. The word surprised even him. Clara looked at Eleanor, then back at him. "If you want me to, sir." He straightened, resolve forming in his chest for the first time in months. "I do." Word spread quickly through the plantation. By morning, everyone knew. The colonel had allowed a laundress's daughter to stay in the big house. Some whispered in disbelief. Others in envy. A few in quiet admiration. Clara returned the next day. And the next. Each night, Eleanor slept a little longer. Each morning, she ate a little more. She began to smile again. To laugh, softly at first, then freely. Clara became a constant presence. She didn't try to replace Eleanor's mother. She didn't push affection or demand trust. She simply stayed. And that, Henry realized, was what his daughter had needed all along. Still, not everyone was pleased. Across the fields, in a neighboring estate, Margaret Hale, a widow of influence and sharp tongue, watched the situation with growing interest and irritation. A laundress's daughter, in the colonel's house. Unacceptable. Dangerous. Scandalous. She leaned closer to her niece, Beatrice, whispering. "This will not end well." One afternoon, as Clara walked through the garden with Eleanor, she felt eyes on her. Henry stood near the veranda, pretending to read a ledger, though his gaze followed them relentlessly. He saw how Eleanor clung to Clara's skirt. How she laughed when Clara spun her around. How she leaned into her side with the ease of a child who had found safety. And he felt something stir inside him, something warm and terrifying. Gratitude, at first. Then admiration. Then something else entirely. He turned away sharply. Impossible, he told himself. She was beneath his station. Too young. Too humble. And yet. That night, after Eleanor fell asleep, Henry found Clara standing by the window, looking out at the moonlit fields. "You don't have to stay so late," he said quietly. She startled. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean." "No," he interrupted gently. "I meant, thank you." She smiled faintly. "I'm just doing what anyone would." "No," Henry said firmly. "You're doing what no one else could." Their eyes met. And in that moment, both felt it. A shift. A line quietly crossed. Before we continue, If you're invested in this story, subscribe to Stories of the Season and comment where you're watching from. These stories are made for those who love slow, emotional, unforgettable narratives. Now tell me. If peace had entered White Heron Plantation quietly, suspicion arrived just as silently. It began with looks. Lingering glances exchanged between servants. Conversations that stopped the moment Clara entered a room. Smiles that did not quite reach the eyes. In a house as large as White Heron, secrets rarely stayed hidden for long, and Clara's presence had become the most talked about subject within its walls. She felt it immediately. Clara had never expected to be welcomed. She was not naive. She knew her place in the social order of the South, knew the invisible lines that separated families like the Montgomerys from people like the Whitfields. But she had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that Eleanor's recovery might soften those divisions. Instead, it sharpened them. One morning, as Clara crossed the rear hallway carrying a basket of freshly folded linens, she heard two maids whispering behind a half-closed door. "She thinks she belongs here now," one murmured. "Colonel's got a soft spot for her," the other replied. Dangerous thing, that. Clara did not stop walking. She did not look back. But the words lodged themselves deep in her chest. Dangerous. That word followed her through the day. Yet Eleanor remained blissfully unaware. The little girl had changed so much in such a short time that even the doctors were astonished. Her cheeks were fuller. Her laughter rang freely through the corridors. She slept through the night, often curled tightly against Clara's side, as if afraid that closing her eyes alone might make the world fall apart again. Clara never left her. Not when her feet ached. Not when her throat was sore from singing. Not when her heart felt heavy from the weight of unwanted attention. Colonel Henry Whitmore noticed everything. He noticed how Clara always waited for Eleanor to speak first. How she knelt to the child's level instead of towering over her. How she listened, truly listened, to stories that made no sense, nodding with seriousness as if every word mattered. He noticed how Eleanor reached for Clara before anyone else. Even before him. That truth stung more than he expected. One afternoon, Henry watched them from the study window. Eleanor sat on the grass beneath the magnolia tree, while Clara braided her hair with careful fingers, humming softly. Henry's chest tightened. Margaret should have been there. The image of his late wife rose unbidden, her laughter, her gentleness, the way she used to sit in that exact spot, reading while Eleanor played nearby. Henry turned away sharply. He poured himself a drink, then stopped. For the first time in months, he set the glass down untouched. That evening, Henry invited Clara to speak with him in the sitting room. She stood stiffly near the door, hands folded, eyes lowered. "You wanted to see me, sir?" she asked. "Yes," he replied, gesturing for her to sit. She hesitated, then perched on the edge of the chair, careful not to appear too comfortable. "I've noticed the changes in Eleanor," Henry said. "And I want to understand how you do what you do." Clara thought for a moment. "I don't try to fix her," she said softly. "I just make sure she knows she's not alone." Henry nodded slowly. "You've done more for her than anyone," he admitted. "Including me." The honesty surprised them both. Clara lifted her gaze. "You were grieving," she said gently. "So was she." The word struck him deeply. "You speak as if you know grief well," Henry said. Clara swallowed. "My father died when I was young," she replied. "Some nights, I couldn't sleep either." Henry leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And who helped you?" he asked quietly. "My mother," Clara said. She sang until the dark didn't feel so loud anymore. Henry exhaled slowly. "I'm grateful," he said. "For you." Clara's heart raced. "I don't need gratitude, sir," she replied. "Just permission to keep doing what I'm doing." "You have it," he said firmly. "And more." She looked up sharply. What do you mean? Henry hesitated. I want you to remain here, he said. Not as temporary help, but as Eleanor's companion. Officially. Clara's breath caught. Sir, people will talk. They already are, Henry replied calmly. Let them. She studied his face, searching for doubt. She found none. I'll do my best, she said quietly. I know, he replied. Across the county, Margaret Hale received word of the arrangement by the end of the week. She sat stiffly in her parlor, lips pressed thin as she listened to her niece Beatrice recount the rumors. They say the colonel allows the girl to dine in the house, Beatrice said. Not with the servants. Margaret's eyes flashed. And you believe this? It's all anyone's talking about, Beatrice replied. Some say she's enchanted the child. Margaret scoffed. Or the father. She rose slowly, smoothing her skirt. This will not stand, she said coldly. The Montgomery name has always meant something. And what will you do? Beatrice asked. Margaret's smile was thin. Remind him. Meanwhile, Clara's world had narrowed to Eleanor. She read to her. Played games. Walked with her through the fields. At night, she sang until Eleanor slept soundly, her small hand always clutching Clara's sleeve. One night, Eleanor stirred and whispered, half asleep, "Don't go." "I'm here," Clara murmured instantly. "Promise?" Clara hesitated, just for a second. "I promise," she said softly. Those words echoed long after Eleanor drifted back to sleep. Clara sat awake long into the night, staring at the ceiling. Promises were dangerous things. Especially ones you weren't sure you had the right to make. The following afternoon, Clara found a folded note waiting for her in the garden. "You are requested for tea tomorrow afternoon. M. Hale." Her hands trembled slightly as she read it. Mrs. Turner's face hardened when she saw the note. "That woman has sharp teeth," she warned. "Be careful." Clara nodded. "I will." But as she walked back toward the house, unease settled deep in her chest. She had come to White Heron to help a child sleep. She had not expected to become the center of a quiet war. And somewhere deep inside, she feared the hardest trial had yet to come. If this story is holding your attention, subscribe to Stories of the Season, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support keeps these long, emotional stories coming. The invitation sat on Clara's small table like a threat disguised as politeness. She read it again that night, the neat handwriting sharp and deliberate. "You are requested for tea tomorrow afternoon. Margaret Hale." There was no warmth in the words. No courtesy beyond formality. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. Clara barely slept. At dawn, she helped Eleanor dress, her hands steady despite the storm inside her chest. The child chatted endlessly about the flowers she wanted to pick later and how she dreamed of a white horse that could fly. "You look tired," Eleanor said suddenly, studying Clara with unsettling seriousness. "I'm fine," Clara replied softly, brushing the child's hair. Eleanor frowned. "You say that when you're worried." Clara smiled. "Then I'll try not to worry." But worry followed her like a shadow. Mrs. Turner noticed immediately. "You don't have to go," the older woman said firmly as they stood in the kitchen. "That woman has no authority over you." "She has influence," Clara replied quietly. "And influence can ruin lives." Mrs. Turner placed a firm hand over Clara's. "Listen to me, child. Whatever happens today, you remember who you are. You didn't come here seeking power. You came to give comfort." Clara nodded. "That's what I'll hold on to." At precisely 3 o'clock, a carriage arrived. The Hale estate sat only 2 miles away, yet it felt like another world. Everything there was pristine, trimmed hedges, spotless steps, servants lined up like ornaments. Margaret Hale waited in the parlor. She was a woman in her early 40s, dressed in deep burgundy silk, posture rigid, eyes sharp as cut glass. Widowhood had hardened her, not softened her. She measured people the way merchants measured goods. "Miss Whitfield," Margaret said coolly. "Please sit." Clara obeyed, folding her hands in her lap. "I'll be direct," Margaret continued, pouring tea she had no intention of drinking. "You found yourself in a position that does not belong to you." Clara met her gaze calmly. "I didn't ask for it." "That's rarely how opportunists begin," Margaret replied. Clara's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "I'm there for a child who was suffering." Margaret smiled thinly. "Children recover. Scandals do not." Silence stretched. "You come from nothing," Margaret said bluntly. "And now you sit in the Montgomery house as if you belong." "I don't pretend to belong," Clara replied. "I serve." Margaret leaned forward. "You sing. You soothe. You charm," she said. "And men confuse that for virtue." Clara stood slowly. "With respect, ma'am," she said, "you don't know me." Margaret rose as well, closing the distance between them. "I know exactly what happens when women forget their place." Clara's heart pounded, but she did not step back. "I know what happens when children are abandoned," she replied quietly. "And I won't be part of that." Margaret's eyes flashed. "You will leave White Heron," she said coldly. "Or I will ensure you are removed." Clara inhaled deeply. "I won't," she said simply. Margaret stared at her in disbelief. "You think you have a choice?" Clara lifted her chin. "I do." The room felt suddenly smaller. Margaret smiled, slow, dangerous. "Then you will learn," she said, "how expensive defiance can be." By evening, rumors had already reached White Heron. Henry sensed it before anyone spoke. The way servants avoided his eyes. The tension in the air. Mrs. Turner told him everything. Henry's jaw tightened with every word. "She threatened her," he said. "Yes," Mrs. Turner replied. And Clara stood her ground. Henry paced the room. "She had no right." "Margaret Hale believes influence is a right," Mrs. Turner said grimly. Henry stopped. "Then she's mistaken." That night, Henry knocked on Eleanor's bedroom door. Clara was seated beside the bed, mid-lullaby. Eleanor slept peacefully. Henry waited until Clara stepped into the hallway. "You went to see Margaret Hale today," he said. "Yes," Clara replied honestly. "Did she threaten you?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. Henry's expression hardened. "No one threatens someone under my roof," he said firmly. "I don't want trouble," Clara said quickly. "I don't want to cause." "You didn't," Henry interrupted. "She did." He paused, then added quietly, "and I won't allow it." Clara looked at him, searching his face. "You don't owe me protection," she said. Henry met her gaze. "I owe my daughter peace," he replied. "And you are part of that now." Something shifted between them. A line drawn. From that night on, Clara's position was no longer ambiguous. Henry publicly announced her role as Eleanor's permanent companion. The backlash was immediate. Letters arrived. Invitations disappeared. Doors closed. Henry did not care. For the first time since his wife's death, he felt certain of something. And certainty was dangerous. But necessary. Late that night, Clara stood by her window, staring out at the moonlit fields. She had stood up to power. She had refused to disappear. And she knew, with terrifying clarity, that there was no turning back now. Because when a poor girl refuses to bow, the world always pushes harder. If this story is gripping you, subscribe to Stories of the Season, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Your engagement keeps these long, cinematic stories alive. The following week didn't arrive like a calendar page turning. It arrived like weather. A slow, heavy pressure in the air. A thickness that made people speak softer in the hallways and glance away before their eyes could be caught. Clara felt it in the way the kitchen went quiet when she entered, not because they didn't like her, most of them did, but because fear has its own manners. When a powerful woman like Margaret Hale decided someone didn't belong, the whole county learned to shift their feet in the same direction. Clara tried to keep her life small. She woke before sunrise, as always, to warm Eleanor's bath water and fold the child's clean dresses. She brushed Eleanor's hair until it shone, tied ribbons with careful fingers, and carried her down to breakfast in the big dining room where a table built for 12 had become a table for 2. Henry still didn't eat much. But he looked at Eleanor now. That, to Clara, mattered more than the food. Eleanor was improving by the day. Not just sleeping longer, but waking without fear. She had begun to hum during daylight hours, soft little melodies that curled around her like a scarf. She laughed more easily. She spoke of her mother without breaking. Sometimes, when she sat in Clara's lap, she would point to the framed portrait of Grace Montgomery that hung in the hallway and say, matter-of-factly, "Mama's watching." Clara would nod gently. "I believe she is." And Eleanor would go right on coloring with her crayons, as if death wasn't an ending, but a door with light behind it. Clara told herself that was the miracle. Not that she had made a child sleep, but that she had made a child feel safe. Still, safety is never just a feeling. In the county, safety was permission. And permission could be revoked. On Thursday, the first open insult arrived. It came wrapped in linen and perfumed paper. Mrs. Turner brought it to Clara in the kitchen, her mouth set tight. "It was delivered to the house," she said. Clara's hands froze over the bread dough she was kneading. "What is it?" Mrs. Turner handed it over. Clara unfolded the note. There were no greetings. No signature. Just a few words written in careful script. "We all see what you are doing. Know your place, or you will be reminded of it." Clara read it twice. Her throat tightened. Mrs. Turner watched her face. "Don't you let them frighten you," she said low. "They're cowards. Anonymous threats are the weapon of weak people." Clara swallowed. "Not weak," she whispered. "Just protected." Mrs. Turner's eyes hardened. "Protected by titles and money doesn't make them strong." Clara folded the note and slid it into her pocket as if she could hide it there, like hiding a flame in cloth. She didn't tell Henry. Not yet. Because Clara knew Henry's temper wasn't loud, he didn't shout like a man desperate to prove he mattered, but it was solid, like oak. And if he cracked, it would crack other things with it. She didn't tell Eleanor either. Eleanor's new calm was fragile, even if it looked steady. Clara refused to place adult cruelty into a child's hands. So Clara carried the fear alone. That afternoon, she took Eleanor to the orchard. The trees were heavy with late-season apples, and the grass smelled like sun-warmed earth. Eleanor wore a pale dress and had insisted on a straw hat with a ribbon that slipped over her eyes. "Clara," she said, skipping beside her. "If I pick the biggest apple, does that mean I'm the biggest girl?" Clara smiled. "It means you picked the biggest apple." Eleanor pouted, then laughed. Clara let herself relax for half a minute. Then she felt it. The sensation of being watched. Not by Eleanor, not by a bird, but by someone with intention. Clara turned toward the fence line. A man stood there. He was broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with a jaw like he chewed rocks for a living. His hair was sandy and cut short, his hat tilted low. He leaned against the fence post as if he belonged there, and his smile was mild in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Silas Boone. He was the ranch foreman, Henry's right hand for everything that required hard authority. He managed the hands, set the shifts, handled the disputes. He was useful. And because he was useful, men like him often believed they were untouchable. Clara's stomach tightened. Eleanor didn't notice him at first. She was hunting apples like a soldier on a mission. But Silas didn't look at Eleanor. He looked only at Clara. "Afternoon," he called, voice easy. Clara kept her tone polite. "Afternoon, Mr. Boone." He pushed off the fence and stepped closer, hands resting casually on his belt. "Heard you've been making yourself important around here." Clara's fingers curled around Eleanor's small hand. "I'm caring for Miss Eleanor," she said. Silas nodded slowly, like he was tasting her words. "That's what they say." Clara didn't move. Eleanor finally noticed him and wrinkled her nose. "You smell like horses." Silas chuckled, but his eyes stayed on Clara. "I do," he said. "That's how you know I work." Eleanor shrugged. "Clara works too." Clara squeezed Eleanor's hand gently as if to say hush, but Eleanor was a child, she didn't yet understand that truth can anger men. Silas tipped his head. "Funny thing," he said. "Folks in town are talking." Clara's spine stiffened. "They talk about everything," she replied. Silas's smile widened a fraction. "Sure. But they're talking about you. Talking about how you moved into the big house without marrying into it." Clara felt heat rise in her chest. "She needed me," she said calmly, nodding toward Eleanor. Silas glanced at Eleanor for the first time, as if noticing an object on a shelf. "She's fine now," he said. "A child stops crying eventually." Eleanor's grip tightened on Clara's hand. Clara's voice sharpened without her permission. "She wasn't fine," she said. "She was suffering." Silas's eyes narrowed slightly. "And now you're the answer," he said. "That's what they think." Clara held his gaze. "I don't control what people think." Silas took one more step forward, lowering his voice. "You should," he murmured. "Because if people think you're climbing, they'll start wanting to see you fall." Clara's heart pounded. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Boone?" she asked, her voice steady but cold. Silas looked amused. "Threatening?" he repeated, almost laughing. "No, ma'am. Just giving friendly advice." Eleanor suddenly stepped in front of Clara like a tiny shield. "Don't talk to her like that," Eleanor said, chin up. Silas blinked, surprised, maybe, by being challenged by a 4-year-old. Then he smiled again. "See," he said to Clara, as if Eleanor had proved his point. "She's attached." Clara reached down and lifted Eleanor into her arms. "That will be all," Clara said. Silas raised his hands in mock surrender. "Of course," he said. "Just, keep your eyes open, Miss Whitfield. Big houses cast big shadows." And he walked away, slow and certain, as if he had all the time in the world. Clara stood in the orchard, holding Eleanor tight. Eleanor's face was pressed into Clara's shoulder. "Was he mean?" the child whispered. Clara forced her voice soft. "He was unhappy," she said carefully. "Sometimes people act mean when they're unhappy." Eleanor sniffed. "I don't like unhappy people," she muttered. Clara kissed her hair. "Neither do I." But deep inside, Clara wasn't thinking about unhappiness. She was thinking about power. Because the more Eleanor recovered, the more Clara's presence became visible. And visibility, in a world built on strict lines, was its own kind of crime. That evening, Henry found Clara in the hallway outside Eleanor's room. Clara was holding Eleanor's favorite blanket, blue with tiny stitched stars. Henry's eyes flicked to it. "She's asleep?" he asked quietly. Clara nodded. "She went down easily tonight." Henry hesitated. Then, "Clara," he said, voice low. Mrs. Turner told me you received a note. Clara's stomach dropped. So Mrs. Turner had told him after all. Clara looked down. Yes. Henry's jaw tightened. May I see it? Clara pulled it from her pocket and handed it over. Henry read it once. Then again. His hand tightened around the paper until it creased. He didn't raise his voice. But the air around him changed. Who? He asked. I don't know. Henry looked at her hard. Do you have a guess? Clara hesitated. Margaret Hale, she admitted. Or someone close to her. But it could be anyone who listens to her. Henry's eyes darkened. And you didn't tell me because? Clara swallowed. Because I didn't want to make you angry, she said softly. And because I didn't want Eleanor to feel like she's the reason trouble comes. Henry stared at her. Then he said something Clara didn't expect. You didn't cause the trouble, he said firmly. You revealed it. There's a difference. Clara's throat tightened. Henry exhaled slowly. No one, he said, voice controlled, writes threats to someone under my roof. Clara's voice trembled. I can handle it. Henry stepped closer. You shouldn't have to, he said. For a moment, Clara saw the grief behind his anger, not just grief for Grace, but grief for the fact that the world still wanted to take things from him. Eleanor had been taken. Now they were trying to take peace. Henry stared at the note again. Then he folded it and slipped it into his pocket like it was evidence. I'll handle it, he said. Clara's breath caught. Henry, she began, then stopped, startled by herself. She had never said his name without thinking. Henry glanced at her, something flickering in his eyes at the sound. Clara corrected quickly, Colonel Montgomery. Henry shook his head. Not in this house, he said softly. Not when it's just us. Clara stood frozen. Henry looked away first. Get some rest, he said, voice rough. Tomorrow is going to be unpleasant. Clara's stomach tightened. What's tomorrow? Henry hesitated, then said. We're going into town. Clara blinked. Why? Henry's expression was unreadable. Because they think they can whisper in corners, he said. They think they can decide what happens in my house. He looked at her. They need to see something, he said. They need to see you standing beside me. Clara's blood ran cold. No, she whispered. Henry, please, no. That will make it worse. Henry's voice was steady. It's already worse, he replied. You're just the only one trying to pretend it isn't. Clara felt tears threaten, not because she was weak, but because she could see the cliff ahead. Town gossip wasn't just talk. In rural America, reputation determined survival. Who hired you? Who sold to you? Who invited you? Who helped you when you were sick? Who turned their backs? If the town turned its back on Henry, he could survive. He had land, wealth, power. If the town turned its back on Clara, there was no safety net. Clara forced herself to speak. What about Eleanor? She asked. Henry's face softened slightly. She's coming too, he said. Clara's heart clenched. That's worse, she whispered. They'll look at her. They'll judge her. They'll say she's being raised by. Henry's eyes flashed. They'll say what they like, he cut in. But they'll say it to my face. Clara couldn't breathe. Henry lowered his voice. Clara, he said, softer now, you didn't save Eleanor just so we could hide like ashamed people. I won't live ashamed. Clara stared at him. His pride was dangerous. But it was also something else. A refusal to let grief make him smaller. Clara swallowed hard. I'll go, she said, voice barely audible. But I'm afraid. Henry nodded once, solemn. "So am I," he admitted. That confession struck Clara deeper than the threat note ever could. Because Henry was not a man who admitted fear lightly. And if he was afraid, tomorrow would be war. The next morning, Eleanor woke excited. "Town," she squealed. "Will we see the candy store?" Clara smiled weakly while dressing her. "Yes," she said. "Maybe." Eleanor looked at her, eyes bright. "Are you coming with me?" she asked. Clara hesitated. Then nodded. Eleanor's smile widened, relief washing over her face. "Good," she said. "Because if you weren't, I wouldn't go." Clara's throat tightened. Children didn't negotiate with social realities. They negotiated with love. By mid-morning, the carriage rolled down the dirt road toward town. Clara sat inside with Eleanor on her lap. Henry sat across from them, posture rigid, hands folded. The wheels rattled over stones. Outside, fields stretched wide under pale winter sun. A few men working near the road paused and watched the carriage pass. Clara could feel their eyes. Eleanor waved cheerfully. Clara forced herself not to shrink. She would not feed the wolves by acting afraid. They arrived in town near noon. The main street was lined with a general store, a feed shop, a church, a small bakery, and a handful of homes built close together like they feared the countryside. People were out. And they watched. Clara felt the staring like needles. Women paused mid-conversation. Men stopped lifting crates. A child pointed openly. Henry stepped out first. He offered Clara his hand, not as a gesture of romance, but as a statement. Clara hesitated. Then took it. Eleanor came down next, holding Clara's other hand. They walked together. A small procession. Not flashy. Not proud. But undeniable. Clara heard whispers. "She's the one. Looks too bold. Maybe she cast a spell. Poor Grace. Henry's lost his mind." Clara's pulse throbbed in her ears. Henry's grip on her hand remained firm, steady. They entered the general store. The bell above the door chimed. The shop owner, Mr. Caldwell, looked up. His smile faltered when he saw Clara. Then he glanced at Henry and forced the smile back into place. "Colonel Montgomery," he said too brightly. "What can I do for you?" Henry's voice was calm. "Sugar," he said. "Coffee. Flour." Mr. Caldwell nodded quickly. "Of course." As Caldwell gathered the items, his gaze flicked repeatedly to Clara as if she were a stain. Clara kept her face neutral. Eleanor leaned close and whispered loudly, "That man is staring." Clara tried not to laugh out of nervousness. Henry didn't even blink. When Caldwell returned with the goods, he hesitated. "Colonel," he began cautiously, "I heard." Henry's voice cut like a blade. "If you heard something you shouldn't repeat," he said evenly, "I advise you not to." Caldwell swallowed. "Of course," he muttered. "Of course." Henry paid, took the bag, and nodded once. "Good day." They left. Outside, the whispers grew louder. Clara's legs felt heavy. Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Are we in trouble?" Eleanor asked quietly. Clara's heart clenched. "No," she said gently. "Not you." Eleanor frowned. "Then why do they look at you like that?" Clara didn't know how to answer. Henry answered instead. "Because they don't know what to do with someone brave," he said. Clara looked at him, shocked. Henry didn't look back. But his words held her upright. They walked toward the bakery. A woman stepped out of the doorway. Margaret Hale. She stood like she owned the street. Her dress was dark, her gloves pristine, her eyes sharp. She smiled faintly when she saw them. Not a smile of greeting. A smile of victory in progress. Henry stopped. Clara felt Eleanor tense. Margaret's eyes slid over Eleanor with false pity, then landed on Clara like a judge delivering sentence. "Colonel Montgomery," Margaret said, voice smooth. "A surprise to see you in town." Henry's voice was flat. "Not really." Margaret's smile sharpened. "And you brought your guest." Clara's spine stiffened. Henry's hand tightened around Clara's. "This is Clara Whitfield," Henry said, tone precise. "She's my daughter's companion and caretaker." Margaret's gaze flicked to Eleanor. "How lovely," she said, though nothing about her tone was lovely. Eleanor glared up at her. "My Clara," Eleanor said possessively. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. "You know," Margaret said, turning her gaze back to Henry, "there are many suitable women in this county. Widows. Mothers. Church ladies. Women of stability." Henry's face didn't change. "Clara is stable," he replied. Margaret's nostrils flared. "She's young," Margaret insisted. "And living under your roof." Henry's voice turned colder. "Under my roof," he repeated, "because I invited her." Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice so only Henry and Clara could hear. "The county will not accept it," she whispered. "They'll cut you off. Cut your business. Your daughter's future." Henry stepped forward, eyes like stone. "If you speak of my daughter's future again," he said softly, "you won't like what happens next." Margaret froze. Clara's breath caught. Margaret recovered quickly, smoothing her expression like silk. "I only speak as a friend," she said. Henry's voice was quiet. "You don't speak as a friend." Margaret's eyes flicked toward Clara again. "You should understand," she said, voice low and venomous, "how quickly fairy tales become nightmares." Clara felt Eleanor squeeze her hand harder. Henry looked at Clara. Then he did something no one expected. He lifted Clara's hand, still held in his, and placed it gently on Eleanor's shoulder, as if forming a chain. Then he addressed Margaret Hale clearly, loud enough for the nearest bystanders to hear. "Clara Whitfield saved my daughter," he said. "If that offends you, I suggest you examine your heart instead of my household." The street went silent. Margaret's face tightened, just for a moment. Then she smiled again, but it was brittle. "How dramatic," she murmured. Henry didn't blink. Margaret turned and walked away, her back straight, her heels sharp on the wooden boards. But Clara knew, deep in her bones, that Margaret had not retreated. She had only changed tactics. They returned to the carriage. Clara's hands were trembling. Henry noticed. "You did well," he said quietly. Clara let out a shaky breath. "I feel like I stepped into a storm," she whispered. Henry looked at her, his voice gentler than before. "You did," he admitted. "But storms pass." Clara met his eyes. "And sometimes storms destroy," she whispered. Henry didn't deny it. Instead, he said something that struck Clara like a vow. "Then we'll build something that can stand," he said. That night, Eleanor slept curled around Clara's arm. Clara sat beside the bed long after the child's breathing deepened, staring at the candle flame. Today had been a battle. But the war was just beginning. Because now the county had seen her. Not hidden in the big house. Not just a rumor. They had seen her walking beside Henry. They had seen Eleanor holding her hand. And for people who lived by unwritten rules, that was unforgivable. Clara whispered into the dark, not to anyone but herself. "I won't leave her." Because love, real love, was not polite. It didn't ask permission. And it didn't retreat quietly. Quick pause, if you're hooked right now. Subscribe to Stories of the Season, hit like, and comment where you're watching from. It helps this channel keep these long, cinematic stories coming every week. The first blow did not come loudly. It never does. It arrived quietly, disguised as concern, wrapped in whispers and half-truths that slid through the county like fog, settling into every parlor, every church pew, every kitchen table where women gathered and spoke in lowered voices. Clara Whitfield became a subject. Not a person. A subject. By the following Sunday, her name had been spoken more times than it ever had in her entire life. She's not who she claims to be. There's a reason her father died the way he did. They say her mother was questionable. Poor Colonel Montgomery. He's blinded by grief. None of it was entirely true. None of it was entirely false. And that was what made it dangerous. Clara felt the shift before anyone told her. She felt it in the way the church fell silent when she entered behind Henry and Eleanor. In the way smiles froze, not hostile but cautious, like hands pulled back from a flame. She sat in the pew, Eleanor tucked against her side, and sang the hymn softly, refusing to look around. Henry noticed. His jaw tightened once. That was all. After service, they were approached not by strangers, but by acquaintances, people who had once nodded respectfully to Clara in passing. "Miss Whitfield," a woman said, smile thin. "How is your mother these days?" Clara blinked. "She's well, thank you. I hear she worked many houses," another added lightly. "Moved around a lot." Clara's chest tightened. "She worked where work was available," she replied calmly. Henry stepped forward then, placing a subtle hand at Clara's back. "Is there a point to this conversation?" he asked evenly. The women smiled too quickly. "Oh no, Colonel," one said. "Just concern." Henry nodded once. "Then let me ease it. Clara Whitfield is under my protection." The word echoed. Protection. It didn't silence the whispers. It sharpened them. The truth was, Clara had always known this day would come. She had never pretended her past was spotless or impressive. She had grown up poor, daughter of a laundress and a man who drank too much when life crushed him too hard. Her father, Thomas Whitfield, had not died heroically. He had died tired. Broken by debt, by illness, by a world that did not forgive men who slipped once too often. When Clara was 12, he had collapsed by the riverbank after working a double shift hauling timber. By the time help arrived, it was too late. Some said it was his heart. Others said whiskey had weakened him. People talked. They always did. Ruth Whitfield had buried her husband without drama and gone back to work the next morning. She taught Clara early that dignity was not something the world granted. It was something you carried yourself. Margaret Hale knew all of this. She had learned it carefully. Deliberately. Margaret had not built her power on money alone. She built it on information, on knowing which strings to pull, which truths to twist, and which sins to exaggerate. On Tuesday morning, she invited 3 women for tea. By Wednesday, the story had grown. By Friday, it was poisonous. She's manipulating him. She's aiming for inheritance. Poor Eleanor, used as bait. Girls like that always have an angle. Clara heard none of this directly. Which was worse? She heard it through tone, through posture, through the way invitations dried up overnight. Even the servants began to shift. Not all of them, but enough. Silas Boone noticed. And Silas Boone saw opportunity. The confrontation came in the stables. Clara had gone to fetch Eleanor's riding pony, a gentle gray mare named Willow. Eleanor had been begging for days, and Henry had finally agreed, hoping the fresh air would do them both good. The stables smelled of hay and leather. Silas leaned against a post, arms crossed, watching her approach. "You're busy these days," he said casually. Clara didn't look up. "I always am." Silas smirked. Important work. Clara paused, sensing the edge beneath his tone. If you need something, Mr. Boone, you should speak plainly. Silas stepped closer. You're playing a dangerous game, he said quietly. Clara turned fully toward him. I'm not playing anything. Silas's eyes roamed over her face. You're clever, he said. Clever enough to know how this ends. Clara's voice was steady. It ends when Eleanor grows strong. Silas laughed softly. No. It ends when the Colonel realizes you're a liability. Clara's chest tightened. And if he doesn't? She asked. Silas leaned in. Then people like me make sure he does. The words sat between them like a threat carved in stone. Clara's pulse pounded, but she refused to step back. Are you suggesting something improper? She asked. Silas's smile vanished. Careful, he warned. False accusations ruin reputations. Clara met his gaze coldly. So do true ones. For a moment, something flickered in Silas's eyes, surprise, perhaps. Then he straightened. You think he'll choose you over the county? He asked. Clara didn't hesitate. I think he'll choose his daughter. Silas scoffed. That little girl won't always be little. Clara's breath caught. Don't speak about her, she said sharply. Silas raised his hands mockingly. Touchy, he said. Just remember, when this falls apart, you won't land softly. Clara watched him walk away, her hands shaking only after he disappeared. That night, she told Henry everything. Not just about Silas. About the whispers. About her father. About the way the county was circling her like a wounded animal. Henry listened without interruption. When she finished, she waited for judgment. It didn't come. Instead, Henry leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes steady. They're not attacking you because of your past, he said. They're attacking you because of your present. Clara frowned. I don't understand. You changed something, he said. You disrupted a balance they were comfortable with. Clara's voice wavered. I didn't mean to. Henry's gaze softened. Most change isn't intentional, he said. But it's still necessary. Clara swallowed. They'll use Eleanor, she whispered. They already are. Henry's jaw tightened. Over my dead body, he said quietly. The breaking point came sooner than Clara expected. It came in the form of a letter. Official. Stamped. Summoning Henry Montgomery to a meeting with the county council. Concern regarding guardianship. Concern regarding household stability. Concern regarding inappropriate influence. Henry read it twice. Then handed it to Clara. Her hands trembled as she read. They're questioning your judgment, she whispered. Henry's eyes burned. They're questioning my authority, he corrected. And Eleanor? Clara asked. Henry's voice lowered. They're suggesting alternatives. Clara's breath hitched. No, she whispered. They wouldn't dare. Henry looked at her. They would, he said. And they will, if we let them. That night, Eleanor woke screaming. Not from a nightmare. From awareness. They're mad at you, Eleanor sobbed, clutching Clara's nightgown. They want you gone. Clara held her tight, heartbreaking. Who told you that? She asked gently. Eleanor sniffed. I heard them. Clara closed her eyes. Children heard more than adults realized. No one is taking me from you, Clara said firmly. Eleanor looked up, eyes shining. Promise? Clara hesitated. Promises were dangerous. But some truths demanded them. I promise, she said. The next morning, Eleanor did something no one expected. When Henry prepared to leave for the council meeting alone, Eleanor refused. "I'm coming," she declared. Henry knelt before her. "This is grown-up business," he said gently. Eleanor shook her head fiercely. "They're talking about Clara," she said. "So it's my business." Henry froze. Clara's heart pounded. Henry looked at Clara. Then at Eleanor. And made a decision. The council chamber was crowded. Men in dark coats. Women sitting stiffly along the walls. Margaret Hale sat near the front, hands folded, expression serene. When Henry entered with Eleanor holding one hand and Clara the other, the room erupted in murmurs. "This is inappropriate," someone began. Henry raised a hand. "My daughter requested to attend," he said. "And I will not deny her." The council chairman cleared his throat. "We have concerns, Colonel Montgomery," he began. "Regarding the influence exerted over your household." Henry's voice was calm. "My daughter is healthier now than she has been in a year," he said. "If that's influence, I welcome it." Margaret spoke then. "Colonel," she said smoothly, "no one questions the child's improvement. But stability matters. Appearances matter." Henry looked at her coldly. "To whom?" he asked. Margaret smiled thinly. "To the county." Henry nodded slowly. "Then allow me to clarify something," he said. He placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "This child's stability comes from feeling safe," he said. "And Clara Whitfield is part of that safety." Murmurs rippled through the room. Margaret leaned forward. "And what happens," she asked softly, "when Miss Whitfield's past resurfaces? When her family history casts a shadow over the Montgomery name?" Henry didn't look at Clara. He looked directly at Eleanor. "Tell them," he said gently. Eleanor swallowed. Then she spoke. Her voice was small. But steady. "Clara sings when I'm scared," she said. "She stays when it's dark. She doesn't leave." The room went quiet. Eleanor continued, emboldened. "My mama left because she died," she said simply. "My papa left because he was sad. Clara stays because she loves me." Clara's breath caught painfully. "And I don't want anyone who doesn't stay," Eleanor finished. Silence. Thick. Uncomfortable. The chairman cleared his throat again. "Well," he said, flustered. "The child's perspective is noted." Margaret's jaw tightened. Henry straightened. "Then we are finished," he said. "Because I will not remove the one person who brought my daughter back to life." He turned to leave. No one stopped him. Outside, Clara collapsed against the carriage, shaking. Eleanor clung to her. "You were brave," Henry said quietly. Clara looked at him through tears. "So were you." Henry met her gaze. "This isn't over," he said. "But they learned something today." Clara nodded. "What?" she asked. Henry's voice was steady. "That they don't decide who belongs in my family." If this story has you emotionally invested, subscribe to Stories of the Season, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support keeps these long, powerful stories alive. After the council meeting, nothing returned to normal. And that, Clara realized, was because normal had never truly existed at White Heron Plantation, only silence, obedience, and the illusion of order. The illusion was gone. Henry Montgomery did not speak of the meeting again. He did not need to. His actions spoke for him. Within days, he made changes that echoed through the estate like quiet thunder. Silas Boone was reassigned. Not dismissed, that would have drawn attention, but stripped of authority. Reduced to routine labor far from the house, far from Eleanor, far from Clara. The message was clear. Loyalty mattered. Character mattered. Blood alone did not. Margaret Hale noticed immediately. She paid Henry a visit under the pretense of reconciliation. She arrived dressed in black lace, mourning her pride more than anything else. Henry received her in the parlor, alone. "I came to clear the air," Margaret said smoothly, settling into her chair. Henry remained standing. "There's nothing to clear," he replied. Margaret smiled thinly. "You embarrassed the council." Henry met her gaze. "They embarrassed themselves." She folded her hands. "You're isolating yourself," she warned. "People are watching." Henry nodded once. "I hope they are." Margaret's eyes flickered. "And when the girl grows older," she pressed. "When she begins to ask questions." Henry's voice was cold. "She already does." Margaret stood. "You're risking everything," she said. Henry finally sat. "No," he replied calmly. "I'm choosing." Margaret's jaw tightened. "This won't end as you hope," she said. Henry's eyes were unwavering. "It already has." She left without another word. That night, Eleanor asked the question Clara had been dreading. "Why do people not like you?" she asked softly as Clara brushed her hair. Clara paused. "Some people are afraid of change," she said carefully. "Are you afraid?" Eleanor asked. Clara smiled faintly. "I was," she admitted. "But not anymore." Eleanor nodded solemnly. "I'm not afraid either," she said. "As long as you stay." Clara's chest tightened. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. But deep down, she wondered if that was still true. The county did not retreat. They adjusted. Within weeks, letters arrived questioning Henry's health. His decision-making. His long-term plans for Eleanor. A suggestion surfaced, quiet, insidious. A boarding school. Out of state. Temporary, they called it. Henry crumpled the letter in his fist. "They want to take her away," he said flatly. Clara felt sick. "They won't," she said, though her voice trembled. Henry looked at her. "They might," he said honestly. "Unless I do something they can't undo." That night, Henry didn't sleep. At dawn, he summoned his lawyer. And by evening, the unthinkable had begun to take shape. Clara discovered the truth by accident. She was bringing tea to Henry's study when she overheard voices. "I want it documented," Henry said firmly. "Irrevocably." The lawyer hesitated. "This will cause talk." Henry's reply was sharp. "Let them talk." Clara stepped back silently, heart pounding. Later, Henry called her in. She stood before his desk, unsure. "Sit," he said gently. She obeyed. "Clara," he began, "I need to ask you something." Her breath caught. "Anything," she replied. "If something were to happen to me," Henry said carefully, "who do you believe should raise Eleanor?" Clara's throat closed. "You," she whispered. "You're her father." "And if I couldn't?" he pressed. Clara shook her head. "I don't understand." Henry leaned forward. "The county wants control," he said. "I want certainty." Clara's heart thundered. "You're not thinking." "I am," he said quietly. Silence stretched. "You want to make me her guardian," Clara said, barely audible. Henry nodded. "If the worst happens." Clara stood abruptly.